Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, those in between. In this very special segment, we have an interview with Variant Edition's owner, Brandon Schatz.
Hello, how's it going?
Not so bad at all. We've had a very exciting charity stream thus far.
Been pretty good, yeah.
That's awesome. It's good to hear.
So my question for you is, getting into the business, when did you start? How did you start? And what drove you to get started?
Oh, wow. Okay, so I started when I moved to Edmonton about 14 years ago. I'd always been into comics. I'd been reading them for as long as my cousins told me I wasn't allowed to touch their comics. That was kind of a bit of an impetus for me to be like, I'm not allowed to read these. Maybe I should check them out. So that was maybe when I was about 8 or 9. I moved to Edmonton when I was about 20, 21. Had to have been 21 if I'm here for 14 years. And I started searching for a comic store. I went around to several different places to try and figure out where I would end up getting my stuff. And only one place in the city had somebody who, when I walked through the door, said, "Hey, how's it going?" Which was not an experience I had when I lived in Red Deer.
Oh, yeah.
Like the process of Red Deer was, and he still has a store, is a good dude when he has seen you for a good 6 months. But, I personally believe that's no way to run a business.
Right.
But yeah, like first time in my life that I had an experience where I walked through the door and somebody said hi.
Like
that was Wizards
service.
Exactly. That was Wizards Comics. I walked in and they also literally just put a sign for help wanted in the window. And I kind of checked them out, said I will come back with my list of comics, and they came back with my list of comics and a resume. Apparently my list of comics was robust enough that they're like, oh wow, this kid actually knows.
Like, he reads.
Yeah, he reads the stuff and he seems to be fairly into it. The interview process was showing up to pick up my comics for a couple of weeks, them kind of asking me some comics-based questions, and then the second time I visited, the owner going like, "So, would you like to work here?" So I did for some time. Ended up quitting there because for a lot of reasons. One of the main ones was I'd kind of been looking at the curve of what comics was, the industry was going to do and where it was going.
Right.
I would say things like, hey, we need to sort of think about how we're purchasing these things and where we want to point the business. And they told me that my ideas weren't welcome.
Unfortunately.
They used different language.
Really?
It was more blunt, but I mean, like, I'd been working there for a long time, and that was sort of the culture there, was just to be a bit more brusque. But at that time I was like, it's really, at the end of the day, I'm making you money. I would like to continue to eat and I guess make you money, but if that's not going to be the case, like, if you're telling me that the way that I view the industry going, I'm going to lose my job one day, I'm going to not do that.
Yeah, I want to take a hard
and that's
balance
how,
out of that for sure.
Exactly. And that's how Variant Edition ended up starting and evolving from there. I gave a huge credit to my partner in the store and in life, Danica, who is also sort of more of the grounding, because I'll have over the years been like, oh, and I'm doing this and I'm doing it this way. And she'll be like, why though? And I'll be like, well, because there's that's how it's been done. And she goes, but that's dumb. And here's why. And you go, oh, you're not wrong about that. So having that voice to even push past, I believe myself to be fairly progressive about sort of the comics industry and the ideas in it, to have a voice even push past that to like, no, but let's look at this practically. I guess what I'm saying is the secret to running a successful comic book business is to run it as a business.
Yeah.
And I would say, circling all the way back to that store in Red Deer, that when we as the Nerd Crusade took a trip to your store just a handful of weeks ago, the welcoming environment from both you and Danica is not something I personally have experienced in this city either. And I'm so glad that your store provides that now.
Honestly, it was truly unexpected to be real with you. You guys were greeting from the get-go, right? Like, even just walking in, I believe Danica gave me a wave. You were out and about and you said hi, and I was just like, well, I mean, wow. Thank you.
And that was before you folks had even introduced to who you were.
Well, exactly, right? We didn't even give you any notion of who we were. We were just in the store, just minding our business, and you guys were just super helpful. And you know what? Not even pushy or anything. It's like if we had questions, I'm sure you guys would have answered. But you let us do our browsing and walk around, and you know what I mean, like completely polite. And the atmosphere again was just very, very cozy in there.
Absolutely. Like our idea is to like one, say hi to make sure that you know that you're welcome in the space, partly because of how comic stores are generally run. And then to kind of give a bit of rope to see like how you're looking, where you're looking, and to kind of gauge like, oh, would you like some recommendations? Would you like some help? Because some people have the air of like, I know what I'm doing, I know what I want, leave me alone.
Yeah.
And the proper response to that is leave them alone.
Just let them do their thing.
Exactly. So yeah, it's a bit of reading people and a bit of just being a decent human being.
Mm.
I've got a question here for you. As I was browsing through your store, there's a lot of inclusivity. Like it's you try to keep it as available for everybody as humanly possible.
Yeah.
And so a question I come up with is, in your store, how do you cater to those that love books and love comics, but maybe their first language isn't English?
That's a good question. So lately we've started trying to bring in, whenever we can and whenever it seems appropriate, alternative language content. Spanish tends to be an easy one to get. French, weirdly more difficult than I'd like, especially considering this is Canada.
Yeah.
It's one of our national languages. But we've also found sort of our all ages area to be very helpful, especially for folks wanting to learn English and go from there. There's also a few books that we make sure we carry that actually have dyslexic friendly fonts so that folks can work with that too. I think the main key to anything like that, whether it's even alternative languages, or I say alternative, it's languages, just basically alternative to what our stock tends to be, I guess, or even just keeping in mind people's different preferences all the way from genre to even who they want to see as protagonists, is being mindful about those things and open to digging into them instead of just being like, oh, it's going to take some time. Like, well, yeah, everything does. It's a matter of kind of what you want to be and present to the world, and to make sure that you can, at the very least, make the efforts that you can in such a way that is helpful. Sometimes you can't always meet the questions, but sometimes that's down to product chains and whatnot, what you have access to. But if you're not asking, then those product chains never exist.
Right.
So
okay. I did take notice to like the creators corner that you have there. Just wondering, how often do you get like independent artists coming to your store and asking to get a showcase, and how does the process work? How does someone get their their stuff showcased on your shelves?
So yeah, we do have a nice local comics area. We had a shelf custom built to look like the province, and that's sort of like our main showcase area. Honestly, it's fairly easy to get your stuff in the store, generally speaking. We do vet it a little bit, because while we like everyone's expression of art, we're also very mindful about anything that might be harmful to folks.
Yes.
So we do try and keep that in mind, and have had to kind of like reject a couple of things before for violence against specific people.
Right, content reasons. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, and I was like, oh no. Because it's also a message of what you're carrying on shelf. Right. There's a difference between, I can get that for you, and here is something that I believe we should have for anybody walking in randomly, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's really, if anybody is a local creator and wants their items on our shelves, we do have a consignment program that is fairly good for folks, and they can message us and ask what those details are, and we can go from there.
Yeah.
For those unaware of the kind of industry as a whole, what is it like running a comic book store? Well, pre-Backstreet Boys concert, and then during Backstreet Boys concert, what is the atmosphere like?
That is a very good question. um, so we're talking about eras, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Okay.
how the atmosphere of your store sort of changed with the changing of the ties that was the Backstreet Boys concert.
I wanna say I remember this in joke that you guys have, but I can't remember the exact context of it.
So to provide some context, there's a very specific platform that doesn't like to use the direct medical term for the thing that made us shut indoors for a handful of months.
Yeah.
And so to circumvent around that, a bunch of us creators on the platform have started using the Backstreet Boys concert.
I love it. Right. I seem to remember when we're hanging out in the comments of your live stream on Thursday night a couple weeks ago, that we kind of pieced it together.
Yeah.
But we weren't entirely, we're very new to the Twitch platform, honestly. But we're like, oh, that's interesting. So yeah, that's good to know. So kind of, we're a weird situation where things didn't change a whole lot for us.
Right.
Now part of that is just because of how we built the business beforehand. We've actually been doing in-city delivery for 4 years now.
Whoa.
And that started out because we were aware of some low mobility folks who were having trouble coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought to ourselves, wait a second, like, isn't this an issue that could be solved with, some kind of delivery system set up? So we kind of built out the bones from there, not charging people with specific low mobility for kind of once a month deliveries, and then small fees to cover gas for people who just can't make it in due to time issues, but are more than capable of doing so. Kind of that goods and service thing of if you're not spending your time, I'm spending mine, so there's a charge for that type of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, and it went from there. So when the Backstreet Boys concert began, we were in this position where we have a robust online store and two components to it: one where you can adjust your subscriptions, and one where you can just sort of browse more graphic novel type things.
Right.
And it offers the two different experiences. One, if you're not really aware of things that you like, our online store, you can search by genre, and then when you're in there, you can fine tune it. So if you're like, hey, I like horror, but I want a fantasy element to it,
Right,
there's a
right.
refine tool where you can take those horror books and click on the fantasy element, and then it refines the choices even more. Sort of like the experience of coming in the store, where we can recommend to your tastes. We kind of built our website to do that too. And so between having our delivery system already running and smoothed out, and having a website where you can kind of browse the way that we would kind of recommend things to you, and even subscribing to books, and our social media, which we ended up doing daily videos for the shutdown that happened here in Alberta. It actually didn't change too much, other than Diamond stopped delivering items. But again, one of those things, we had moved a lot of our orders away from Diamond in terms of graphic novels, because they're actually the worst at graphic novels.
We've heard.
by default, they're the best at single issues, but it's because they were the only single issue comics distributor out there.
Yeah.
And so you can be the best by also being the worst if you're the only one.
Right. Not only are you the best by default, but you're also the worst by default. You are in first and last place.
Exactly.
Become the villain. Yeah.
Yeah, and so a lot of that too is sort of, if you're not trying to better yourself in that situation, like, it's very easy to contextualize them as the worst, and quite honestly they are.
So for those that like for some youngsters that might be coming into your store, what would you recommend for some people that, you know, your 7 to 10 age group, your sort of 10 to 15 age group?
So we actually have the back third of our store is mostly all ages product, and we have those somewhat divided into 3 areas: littles, middles, and young adult. So the littles area is sort of more of the easier reading things. We keep those on the lower shelves in certain sections. And then the middles, we have a little higher. The young adult, we have sort of more in its own section of a lot of the young adult stuff kind of bleeds into middles just because of everyone's different reading levels and all that kind of stuff. But we also have all of our graphic novels separated out by genre. And so in the all ages section, we have things like creatures, which is more about like animals and cryptids and all that kind of stuff. Adventure, magic, space and robots, learning, and heroes and slice of life stuff. So we've kind of got that sort of base level of organization out there, and then otherwise we always ask people what their tastes are, or what their kids' tastes are, or who they're buying for, what their tastes are, to try and recommend stuff. Our main focus when we do that is to ask them about anything other than comics, because if they're asking, then it's kind of not helpful to ask them what kind of comics they like. They don't know yet.
Right. And I see even on your website, you promote it very blatantly that you fancy yourself a comic sommelier.
Yes. I forget how that term came up, but I didn't come up with it. Somebody did, and I'm like, I'm stealing this.
Coined the phrase for you.
Yeah, basically pairing people with the stories that they are going to love the most.
To further along that, for those that are new to your store, you have a very interesting way of finding out exactly what people are interested in and how to assign comics to them. Could you explain a little bit about that?
Absolutely. One of the easiest ways that we find doing that is playing a game called Pick 3, which is basically asking people for 3 things that they're interested in, usually from TV, movies, or prose books. Sometimes even musical tastes can be thrown in there too. And we kind of like blend that in our heads and come out with something that has elements of all 3 in there.
Every story usually has that 1 or 2 artifacts, you know what I mean? Something that's vintage or older, just priceless, that sits on the shelf and people often contemplate about buying, or it's one of those rarer things that you can find in a store. You have one of those?
Sort of like a hard to find, or like a really cool.
Yeah.
We do this thing that we kind of push against, and a little bit of it is because so many of the other stores do it a lot better than we could. Our focus is so much on connecting people with story, that what you're speaking for is more of the collector's end. And while we do get in a lot of those, it's not our primary focus in terms of the push out to people.
Right.
I want to definitely say that that's not a bad thing that happens. It's just sort of like we feel like we have a specific role in this industry, and to become a collector, first you have to be a reader. And so I feel like we are a bit of a feeder system for a lot of places, and sometimes that feeder system ends with us because they're very happy with their service, and sometimes it ends with, collecting other things, and in which case we'll fully admit that we're not the best place to go to if you're looking for that kind of premium book, basically.
Okay.
I can sure speak to me and Shino here. We are on different scales. I'm more of a collector and a reader and a story appreciator, whereas my co-host here can speak for himself.
I haven't read in a long time. I fell off, to be honest with you. For me, though, way back in the day, I did collect a whole lot, and a lot of my stuff was, again, I think I've already spoken about it a bunch of times, but a lot of my stuff was more of the original run of 90s X-Men, 80s Spider-Man, the stuff that had like a lot of core storylines going on at the time, even further back. So for me, nowadays it's more of the nostalgia for me. I haven't really collected it in so long. It'd be nice to get back into it, but I'm stuck with the old era. And that's what I've been on, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that sort of puts us in a super nice dichotomy, right? Let's promote Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil, and he's very much okay, if you like Daredevil, the one you have to read is Frank Miller's.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things I really love about the medium is that despite what a lot of people will tell you, man, old stories exist and they don't go bad.
No, they don't. No, because I believe we were walking through your store when we went to go visit, and we were looking at some covers, and Red had shown me, what's going on with Excalibur. Cool and all. I like the idea. But then at the same time, on that same stand, I pulled out a book. I'm like, hey, look at this. They have God Loves Man Kills, a really good X-Men storyline that happened like way back. You guys should read this, And again, it speaks into the whole generation of like, this is what's happening now, but check this stuff out too. This, this story was heavy hitting, and it had a lot of stuff into it. So, like he said, we have that nice range, and we kind of educate each other.
That's awesome, and that's the way it really should be, is additive.
Yeah.
Another prime example of that is without me and my co-host Table, Shino here would not have read Tom King's Mr. Miracle.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And that there is a life-changing book.
Yeah.
There was my life pre Mr. Miracle and getting all the way through it for the third time in one sitting. And then there was after that.
Right.
Yeah, Tom King's really built some wonderful finite runs. Mr. Miracle is probably one of the pinnacles of that. His Vision series is also really good. And Sheriff of Babylon, there's a single issue of that where two characters get drunk sitting by a pool. That's one of my favorite issues of comics of all time.
Oh yeah.
It just has so much character in it, and so much of this because they're coming from these completely different perspectives, but they're just sort of like getting drunk and sharing those perspectives.
Yeah.
And partly because they're drunk, they're just like, you know what, this makes a lot of sense, because it takes away all of that precious ego in a lot of ways in that scene. So yeah, it's great.
So the big book I find amongst kids, I've got some young cousins, and they really enjoy Dogman.
Oh, of course.
Right? I mean, every kid in all of North America right now is reading Dogman. Like Dave, how do we pronounce his last name?
Dev Pilkey, yeah.
Thank you. I used to read him as in Captain Underpants.
Yeah.
Yep. So the latest 2 volumes of Dogman have initial print runs of 5 million copies.
Holy crap.
So yeah, so when a lot of people are like, oh, that stuff doesn't count for the comics industry. No. That stuff is the comics industry right now, my friends. When people discount Scholastic as a publisher, between Dave Pilkey and Raina Telgemeier, not only is that the current comics industry, but that's begetting the future comics industry. It's pretty wild.
So now that they've read Dogman, where should I point them?
Oh goodness, there's a lot of good places, especially right now that everybody's sort of pointed at all of these comics, and that they're like making a lot of money. There's a lot that I would suggest. One of my favorites is Bird and Squirrel, which does sort of have more of that goofiness mixed with like a bit of regular show type feel.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, I find a lot of comics these days have very much of a regular show type feel.
Yeah.
Especially for all ages. While it's not a comic, it definitely borrows a lot from comics specifically, and is sort of more of that prose illustrated mix that you found with actually more so with Captain Underpants, because that was more prose art mix and not so much like comic specific. But a series called The Bad Guys goes over extremely well. It's basically like all kinds of animals that were or have been pegged as being evil, who decide that they're like a wolf or a spider and a shark and all this kind of stuff, and are like, no, we're gonna prove that we're actually good, that we're good people, and we're gonna push past maybe some bad tendencies that we have and try and do well. And I've read a few of those too after some suggestions from folks, and like those are two places that I would definitely point Dogman readers towards. Bird and Squirrel is by a writer named James Burks, writer-artist. And then Bad Guys is Aaron Blabey, Blabey. And Aaron with 2 A's, RON.
That will make searching for it, or even searching for it on your website, very easy now.
Absolutely.
So basically, you said, what comic book got you in, like got you started? You said that something got you into the whole medium. Which title pulled you in?
So this one's a bit of a weird one. Not for obscurity, but because a lot of people will kind of be like, what, really? I mean, outside of Archie, which got me like first reading comics, but what kind of got me into the medium in a way that was like, well, I guess I'm here now. Sensational Spider-Man #0, the first issue that Ben Reilly takes over the mantle of Spider-Man.
Oh, from Scarlet Spider to Spider-Man himself.
Yeah. The Clone Saga stuff, I'd been hearing about it for quite some time. And one of my cousins collected Spider-Man. My other cousin collected X-Men. X-Men seemed a little too complicated for me.
Okay.
But I mean, like the Clone Saga wasn't any less complicated.
Yeah.
But the idea that my cousin refused to let me even touch those books kind of said about like, ooh, this is very interesting. And then Sensational Spider-Man #0 was specifically a jumping on point. Like the Clone Saga had quote unquote ended.
Yeah.
Supposedly. And this was the way forward. So, yeah.
In the age of instant gratification, like my attention span is just getting, just absolutely sucks now that I've downloaded TikTok.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How can comic books and even digital reading adapt to that?
So a lot of it already is. What you're seeing is it's harder and harder for ongoing series to gain traction. This is somewhat opposite as to what the industry has been up until fairly recently, because an ongoing series, you would get more readers subscribed to, somewhat even through inertia, than you would a miniseries. A miniseries would be like, oh, well, they don't have faith in the series or whatnot. But now you're getting these things like Mr. Miracle, like DC's Black Label line and a few other ideas, where because it's a concise thought and that it can say something and call it a day at the end of it, a lot of people are moving more towards those projects, both in superhero areas and in creator-owned areas. A lot of people are moving to graphic novels because it is the binge format, really.
Yeah.
And you are definitely seeing that shift, because it's not even just competing against other comic book series out there. It's competing against, and it's not just competing against Netflix. It's competing against every good thing that a person's ever enjoyed. Because now it's not, this is available now and you have to buy it and own it. It's available now, and like if you want to stream something like The Office, which apparently as of like 2 weeks ago was once again the second most streamed show.
Wow.
Including new television on any kind of streaming platform. Like, you're competing against that. You're competing against a person's want to just sort of find that thing that they know is good instead of the thing that might be okay.
Yeah.
And so the trick is you can't really do an ongoing unless it's amazing. And comics are having a tough time adjusting, partly due to inertia, but a lot of companies are, and they're doing quite well with it, honestly. Absolutely. And I'm looking at the chat stream, and I do agree The Office isn't even that good. I did really like it, but it's one of those things where you go back and visit it and again, and you go like, oh.
Like it's all right sitcom as for what it is, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, as far as the fandom goes, it could be a little overrated. I can kind of agree to that too. Some of it's funny. I've seen some things here and there. I'm just like, that's pretty funny. But overall, like that, like I guess, I mean, everybody, everyone has a fandom. So I mean, all the power to the Office fans, right? But
yeah, there's a good 3-season show inside the 8 or 9 that it got.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the same with Community too. Like, its later seasons maybe not so much, but its first 3, magical.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
That also speaks to comics having an end, like going exactly 12 issues and knowing when to write a story and knowing when to stop, versus say Batman and Tom King's Batman having 100 issues.
Well, he did a good try. It got to 85.
Okay. Thank you very much for being on our show this evening.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for having me and dealing with my nonsense.
Not at all.
Please,
You're great.
Our absolute pleasure.
Yeah, you're fantastic.
Again, just like our previous interview, our digital door is very, very much open to have you on for any show we might have on in the future.
Brandon's cool in the fact that when I brought up Xenozoic Tales, he knew exactly what I was talking about right away, and he was just like, everybody should love Cadillacs and dinosaurs. So I'm like, this guy knows his stuff, so I'm gonna have to come here frequent this place for sure.
Here's a very online update about that. So it's temporary out of print until the summer, until June.
Wow. Okay.
So that's probably when I'll be bugging you next about that specifically. Okay. Though something cool to look at that we found on sale that we ordered in that should be in soon is, they call it an artist edition.
Okay.
And so it reproduces the art of the book with like the lettering kind of plugged in and everything like that.
Right.
At the size that it was produced.
Really?
With full color scans. So you get to see all the like little bits that were erased, that were the blue line, the everything.
Okay.
So that could even be something to just even look at next time you're in the store.
I will. Let me know when that comes through, and I'll definitely come in and take a look at that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate this store so much. Officially, this is the Nerd Crusades comic store of choice. Comic store of choice.
Yeah.
And so much
awesome. That's so cool. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we've already got a couple things aside for you folks. So
Perfect.
Excellent. We will have somebody pick that up soon-ish.
No worries.
no worries.
I mean,
Yeah.
I live the closest. That's no problem for me.
No problem.
Yeah.
That
And looking
sounds
forward to see you
wonderful.
soon when we looking forward to see you soon when we get a chance to come to your store again.
Very cool. We'll see you folks around.
Take
Have a
care.
good day.
You too. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. If you like this video, go ahead and button mash a thumbs up. If you want to swing by when we have a new video, web up the sub button. Oh, and while you're at it, hit the bell to be notified by.